GLM 5.2's output costs $4.40 per million tokens, and Gemini 3.6 Flash charges $7.50. That's a 41% gap, and at serious volume, you're talking real money left on the table every single month. Both models dropped in mid-2026, and people are picking between them right now for production workloads. I'm comparing GLM 5.2 versus Gemini 3.6 Flash across 5 tests, pulling from official pricing pages, artificial analysis measurements, and vendor benchmarks. Numbers I could actually verify. GLM 5.2 wins on cost and coding, but there's one workload where that price advantage stops mattering completely. And if that's your use case, you might be picking the wrong model. We get to that in test 5. My name is Brian, and I'm in these tools 12 hours a day, so you don't have to be. I go through the pricing pages, the benchmark docs, and the artificial analysis data, so you get the honest version, not the marketing version. You've probably heard both tools are great for coding and agentic work. So who actually needs to care if you're running more than a few million tokens a month through an agent loop, or you need self-hosted inference for compliance? The wrong pick here costs you real money and real engineering time. Test 1, coding and agentic performance. A solo dev ships a bug fix agent on a Friday. It runs overnight on 200 files, and it misses half the issues because the model can't handle long horizon tasks. That's the failure mode here. And the question is, which model actually holds up on hard coding benchmarks? GLM 5.2 scored 81.0 on Terminal Bench 2.1 and 62.1 on Savi Bench Pro, both vendor reported scores, and both up from the previous version. Gemini 3.6 Flash has no published figures on either of those benchmarks, so a direct apples to apples comparison just isn't possible here. Take this with a grain of salt. These are vendor reported scores, not independent third-party runs on identical prompts. The only Gemini figure I could find is a community reported 54% on S2V Bench Lite, which is a different benchmark entirely, so the gap might be smaller than it looks on paper, or it might not be, we genuinely can't say. GLM 5.2 ticks test 1. Gemini didn't show up with a competing score on either benchmark, at least not one I could find. So on hard coding tasks, GLM 5.2 is the only model with verified numbers, and that puts it up 1-0. Test 2, inference speed and latency. If you're streaming responses to users in a live product and the model is generating at 157 tokens per second when a competitor does 227.7, your users feel that lag. And that's the gap we're actually looking at here. Okay, so here's what I found. Gemini 3.6 Flash outputs 227.7 tokens per second on the artificial analysis median versus 157.5 for GLM. 5.2 about 44% faster on bulk output, but GLM 5.2's first token arrives in 1.36 seconds, while Gemini 3.6 Flash takes 14.74 seconds. So bear in mind, these are measuring pretty different things. Gemini 3.6 Flash takes test 2 on raw output speed, GLM 5.2 closes the gap on time to first token, but on sustained throughput, the artificial analysis median is pretty clear. 44% faster is 44% faster, and that ties it up 1-1. Test 3, cost per token. Gemini 3.6 Flash charges $7.50 per million output tokens. Run 1 million tokens a day for a month, and that's $225 in output costs alone. Swap to GLM 5, 2 at $4.40, and that same month costs you $132, which is $92 a month saved on just one workload. I pulled both official pricing pages. GLM 5.2 is $1.40 per million input tokens and $4.40 on output. Gemini 3.6 Flash is $1.50 output, a 41% savings on output for GLM 5.2. One caveat, Gemini's cached input is 15 cents per million versus GLM 5.2's 26 cents. So if your workload is cache heavy, that gap narrows. GLM 5.2 wins test 3 on cost. The cache pricing does make Gemini more competitive on blended rate. I'll give it that, but on straight output, which is where most agent workloads spend their money. GLM 5.2 is clearly cheaper, and that puts it ahead 2-1. 2 tests left, and test 5 is the one where GLM 5.2's price and coding advantages stop mattering completely. If you're building a multimodal app, the score right now might be totally irrelevant to you. Test 4, reasoning and benchmark scores. A score of 51 on the Artificial Analysis Intelligence Index is the highest any open weight model has posted. And if your agent needs to reason through complex multi-step problems and the model fails, you're debugging hallucinations instead of shipping product. Pretty lopsided, honestly. GLM 5.2 posts a 51 on the AA Intelligence Index, highest of any open weight model, and 89.5% on GPQA Diamond. What surprised me is that Gemini 3.6 Flash has no published score on either of those benchmarks, so I couldn't find a direct comparison point at all. GLM 5.2 takes test 4. I went in thinking Gemini would have at least something on the AA Intelligence Index. It's a widely used measure, but I couldn't find any published figure for Gemini 3.6 Flash. So on the data, we have GLM 5.2 wins, and that makes it 3-1. Test 5, multimodal and flexibility. If your product needs to process images, audio, or video alongside text, one of these models just can't do it natively, and no amount of coding performance fixes that. Gemini 3.6 Flash handles text, image, audio, and video natively. That's the full stack. GLM 5.2 is text only, but it's MIT licensed, self-hostable, and runs on consumer hardware via 1-bit GGUF. Both models share a 1 million token context window, so that part's a straight tie. This one's a split. Gemini wins on multimodal input, GLM 5.2 wins on open weight flexibility, and the context window is a dead tie. So overall verdict for this test, tied. That holds the final score at 3-1 for GLM 5-2 with one tie. GLM 5, 2 wins on coding benchmarks, 81.0 on Terminal Bench, 2.1, 62.1 on SWE Bench Pro. It's 41% cheaper on output tokens at $4.40 per million versus $7.50. It's MIT licensed and self-hostable on consumer hardware, and its first token arrives in 1.36 seconds versus 14.74 for Gemini 3.6 Flash. Gemini 3.6 Flash wins on raw output speed, 227.7 tokens per second versus 157.5 for GLM 5. 2, it handles text, image, audio, and video natively with no extra work. Its cached input is 15 cents per million, 42% cheaper than GLM 5.2's 26 cents, and it runs fully managed with zero infrastructure overhead. All right, so the overall score is 3-1 for GLM 5, 2 with one tie. That 41% output cost gap is real, and it compounds fast. If you need coding, agentic loops, or self-hosted inference, pick GLM 5.2. If you need multimodal input or a fully managed service with no ops overhead, pick Gemini 3.6 Flash. I ran GLM 5.2 against Opus 4.8 next. And the cost story flips pretty hard. Opus costs way more, but the benchmark gap shrinks to almost nothing on some tasks. And that comparison is already on the channel if you want to see where the unit economics actually break down.